Welcome to Union Public Library, presenting Suzanne Magnion, whose name I probably butchered. She is the Public Affairs Director with the Statue of Liberty Ellis Island Foundation. She raises funds for and oversees projects for these two national monuments, and she also works with the press. The most immediate being the Statue of Liberty Museum. So please hold your questions and put them in the chat, and we'll answer them at that time. And please mute yourself at this time. So thank you so much to everybody for being here. Here's Suzanne. Here's Suzanne.
Okay, here I am. Okay, hi everyone. Thanks, Debbie, for that introduction, and thanks to everyone for joining us tonight. I can pretty much guarantee that I will have technical difficulties because I don't do this often enough not to. But as Debbie mentioned, I am the Director of Public Affairs with the Statue of Liberty Ellis Island Foundation. I've been with the organization, I've been with the organization for about 4 years. It really is a great organization to work with. We have been around since 1982. That's when the foundation was established. We were coming upon the Statue of Liberty's centennial, which would have been in 1986. And the statue definitely needed some work, and Ellis Island for sure needed some work. It had been abandoned in 1954, 56, and it was really falling apart, as I'll talk about in a little while. So Ronald Reagan was president at the time, and he enlisted Lee Iacocca, who was then chairman of the Chrysler Corporation and probably one of the most well-known people in the country. So he was enlisted to oversee this challenge of raising hundreds of millions of dollars for these two projects and getting them off the ground. So Mr. Iacocca himself was a first-generation American. These are two manifests from when his father came and went to the US. That was common for immigrants to come to and fro from their country of origin. And this shows a couple of times that Lee Iacocca's dad came back and forth to America. I think the second one is when he returned with his wife, if I remember correctly. So we have done as an organization over 250 projects, large and small, in the last nearly 40 years, all done in partnership with the National Park Service. We work directly with. I've listed here just our major initiatives, which I shouldn't say just because they were quite the large undertaking. The statue restoration, if anyone was around in the 80s, you may remember those commercials. I think Gregory Peck started a few of them, and probably Charlton Heston, and there were penny campaigns. Kids gave lots of money. We hosted Liberty Weekend for the Statue Centennial, 4th of July weekend in 1986. And then these are just some of the other major projects that we did. I'll talk about a few of them as we go through. So I'm going to give a little bit of history on both of these monuments. Nothing too deep. You can get into the depth of their history at the museums that are on the two islands. Starting with Lady Liberty. As some of you may know, the statue's official name is Liberty Enlightening the World. She was a gift from the people of France to the people of the United States, and was dedicated on October 28th, 1886. The goal had been to make it for our centennial. The idea went back more than 10 years, but fundraising and transporting a giant statue took more time than expected. The two people who were key behind the initiative of the statue were a French scholar called Edward de Laboulaye and sculptor Frederick Bartholdi. Another person not pictured here was Gustav Eiffel, who you all know from the tower, and he was the one who was came up with the idea of the insides of the statue to be able to keep it up. There was talk of filling her with sand and other things to try to keep the copper in place, because the copper obviously is a quite soft metal. The statue itself, her design carries much meaning. What many are unaware of is the statue's tied to the end of slavery. De Laboulaye was a staunch abolitionist, and with the emancipation of slaves and the end of the Civil War, he wanted to recognize this achievement in America, America's continued path towards liberty, as well as celebrate the long-standing relationship between the two nations. So from a design standpoint, these shackles, the broken shackles here, represent the end of slavery. Unfortunately, given their location at her feet, most people can't see them unless you have these aerial images. Earlier incarnations of the design had the shackles in her hand, but they ended up being broken shackles at her feet. And then, of course, the statue's tablet, it represents our centennial, or actually our Declaration of Independence, and us being a nation of laws. And then the torch representing freedom. Now I'm going to go into a bit of, just really quickly, the restoration in the 1980s. So as you'll see here, this was the torch this was the original torch. I'll show you a few more pictures in a second. When the statue was restored, it was done all from 1982 to 1986, which is pretty incredible. This scaffolding here that was created was at the time the largest freestanding scaffolding in the world. And actually the only reason for the scaffolding was to replace the torch. I'm scared enough to go up into her crown. I'm really glad I didn't have to go up into that scaffolding. Here are just some what I find fascinating images of the restoration. Now, the statue itself, people ask, why wasn't she restored to her original color, which is the color of a penny? And if you're curious, it's only about the width of 2 pennies is her skin. The patina that formed over the years is actually a protective coating. So this gentleman here is working, there was a patch needed on her eye. One of her curls needed to be patched. Her nose needed to be patched. You'll see here all of the rays in her crown were removed and replaced. They were learned during the restoration that one of the rays had been installed incorrectly and had been rubbing against her arm for 100 years and did some damage. So that was reinstalled correctly. I mentioned the torch. So when the torch went up in the 1800s, it looked like this, minus the gold coating. The statue was originally under the jurisdiction of the Lighthouse Authority, and she was supposed to serve as a lighthouse. And over the years, more and more holes or windows were cut into the torch, and they never successfully really made her a lighthouse. What they succeeded at was creating a great deal of damage, especially down the arm, because water and the elements in general trickle down through the statue's torch into her arm. So with the centennial restoration, the key things that were worked on were redoing the torch. Artisans from Europe came over and worked with Americans to recreate the torch in its entirety, following the the design that Bartholdi intended, as well as replacing all of the armature bars, which are basically her skeletal system to keep her in place. So they went from iron to steel. Yes, I believe that's what it was. And all of those were replaced as well. So those were the key factors in the restoration project. And then the statue's restoration culminated with Liberty Weekend. The tall ships came into town, large firework display. And there was also a small museum that our foundation put together with the Park Service that lived inside her pedestal. And that worked out great until, unfortunately, September 11th. And with September 11th, the Park Service changed its security protocol. And as such, they decreased the number of people who could get into the statue, both to her pedestal as well as up to her crown. Again, if you grew up in this area, especially, or if you have kids who did, there was the class trip. I know I took, I think it was in 5th grade or 7th grade. And if you are familiar with that experience, you will remember that there was a line going all the way from her head down and out, and you just waited. There was one person on every single step. And it's either hot or cold in there, no air conditioning, no heat. There is a little bit of heat in there now, but that was limited or restricted, I should say, with September 11th. So with the 4.5 million people pre-COVID who were visiting Liberty Island every year, only about 5% were able to go up to the crown, and only 20% to the pedestal and where the museum lived. So that left millions of people not having an experience of what it was like inside the statue, not learning about her history. And that led the Park Service and the Foundation to partner to create the Statue of Liberty Museum. This museum opened in May of 2019. And in here, it's a relatively small museum, as you can imagine. It's on the back part of Liberty Island, where there actually used to be housing when the military was there as a base. And then a handful of rangers and the park superintendent lived there for many, many years, up until Sandy. And then that was when the last person left that island for good. So this is the statue, the museum opened, as I said, in 2019. And it tells the story of the statue's history. It has some wonderful visuals that walk you through, showing models of what Bartholdi created as he came across the structure. It has some replicas. It's a face replica of her foot, and shows how she's used in pop culture. It's really a wonderful experience, and it is open. Liberty Island is open, just so you know. Both Liberty and Ellis are open. It's also home to her original torch, which had been living in her pedestal. On November 15th, 2018, there was a gigantic blizzard that day. You all may remember. It took you 4 hours to go 2 miles. That was the day we moved the torch from the pedestal to the new museum, with about 2 hours to spare before the storm came in. So that was a day to remember. But I really encourage you all to go out there. It's just itself being in this space, which we call the Inspiration Room at Gallery. It certainly is. I recommend you coming out there. So now I want to move on to the connection between the statue and Ellis. When I think of the statue, and before I started working at the organization, I thought about immigration. And that, in fact, was not the original connection. It's just by happenstance that Ellis Island and Liberty Island are close to one another. And the connection was actually not made until nearly 2 decades after the statue was dedicated in the 1880s. That is when a sonnet written by Emma Lazarus became well known. So Emma her family went back. They had been here since colonial times. She was the descendant of Portuguese Sephardic Jews And her family she herself was very involved with working with immigrants and refugees, and that was an important mission of hers. And that's really what inspired the new Colossus when she wrote that. So she wrote it as part of a fundraising drive. Now, when the French gave the statue to America, the French paid for the statue itself, and the US was charged with paying for her pedestal. So there were fundraisers, and it was all raised by the people. There was no government money. So it was Emma writing this sonnet was part of a fundraiser that she was involved with. A little bit of trivia. It was about 10, 15 years after Emma's death that her poem became known when a friend of hers called Georgina Schuyler, who was the great-granddaughter of Alexander Hamilton and his wife Elizabeth. Schuyler, I'm not sure. From my listening to my Hamilton soundtrack, I should know that. But her friend found the sonnet and was the one who inspired the poem to be put on a plaque and put into the statue. So here is going to be technology glitch number 1, I'm pretty sure. Let's see if this works.
The new Colossus.
Can you hear it?
Not like the brazen giants of Greek fame,
with conquering limbs astride from land to land. Here their sea-washed sunset gate shall stand.
a mighty woman with a torch,
whose flame is the imprisoned lightning.
in her name, Mother of Exiles.
From her beacon hand glows worldwide welcome.
Her mild eyes command the air-bridged harbor the twin cities frame.
Keep, ancient lands, your storied pomp.
Cries she with silent lips.
Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses.
Yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore.
Send these, the homeless, tempest tossed, to me.
I lift my lamp beside that golden door.
That is a recording of people visiting Liberty Island. That's the wind in the back. So it's people obviously from all around the world reciting the poem, which I think is absolutely beautiful. It's part of our the audio tour experience when you go to Liberty Island. But that's what initiated the connection between the statue and immigration, that poem, as well as obviously when people came through the port of New York up the Hudson, they saw the statue before they got to Ellis Island. Also, she was famous for sending off and greeting the troops when they came to and from war. So that connection between the statue and immigration grew over time. That was not the initial intention when she was created in 1886. So I'm going to talk now about a little bit about Ellis, and then obviously get into the immigration experience. So Ellis was operational from 1892 through the mid-50s, and the foundation, just after we did the centennial of the statue, we worked on the restoration of Ellis Island. Here are some images of Ellis in great disrepair. As our CEO, who has been with the organization since its start, he said there were trees growing in the Great Hall, and there was water damage everywhere. His feeling being, if only they had closed the windows, so much less damage would have happened to this magnificent building. So the restoration took place, and it culminated in the creation of the Ellis Island Museum of Immigration. So if anyone on this has visited, you get off the ferries over here, and through these doors are the baggage room. And then upstairs is the Great Hall, formerly known as the Registry Room. This is where all immigrants pass through for inspection. And as you can see on the picture on the left, the room changed a little bit. It's set up over time, but hundreds of people, dozens of languages all at one time. When they arrived, they went through inspection, and this is where they went through to be checked through the immigration records. And currently, with the restoration, I mean, the hall was restored to the way it looked between 1918 and 1924. I consider this a fun fact. The ceiling here, those tiles, were done by a Spanish artist, and when the restoration happened, I think the number, they only had to replace 12 of them. I think the number was that low. The artisanship was so amazing. So with the museum opening in 1990, it focused on the peak years of immigration at Ellis Island. The years here, as I point out, 1892 through 1924. Ellis was America's largest and most active immigration station. Its first year, just shy of 446,000 people arrived. The leading countries of origin, nationalities were Germany, Russia, Austria-Hungary, Italy, Ireland, and Sweden. And that was pretty much on par through the 1890s. From the late 1890s until 1921, Italians were the largest group every year. And then, just as an FYI, the largest immigration year was 1907. That is when just under 1,005,000 immigrants came through. And we are coming upon the peak day, which is April the 17th. So those are just some interesting facts about when people came through. So when the museum opened, almost immediately visitors were asking, well, what about my story? Sorry, someone opened the garage in my house. What about my story? My family has been here forever, or we're recent immigrants. And that led us to expand the museum experience through Peopling of America. So there is a whole section dedicated to the pre-Ellis years, from the colonial era through to the 1800s. That includes forced immigration, slavery, and how the natives were mistreated upon people's arrival, and then immigration through today. Recent immigration and the political issues that come through that, the trends that go with that as well. So the goal being is really to take the visitor through the entire experience of what made America, America. So here is a bit about the immigrant experience. And this is not the image I thought it was. I'm a little lost. Okay, so here we go. Only about a third of passengers, that was steerage class, were the ones who actually came ashore on Ellis Island. Other people, if they were in first or second class, they were checked when they were in port and went immediately to New York or to the train station, something like that. This is just an example of two of the ships that did frequent travels between the Europe and the US. I'm not sure if I mentioned this specifically, it was about 12 million people who came through Ellis. And these are just some wonderful photos from the years when people were coming through. For those who came through, the inspection process lasted less than 5 hours. Only 2% of immigrants were denied entry. And the two main reasons were being diagnosed with a contagious disease, or if a legal inspector was concerned about you becoming a public charge. There are stories that you had to have a certain amount of money depending on when you came in, and that people would just keep passing the same money back and back to the folks behind them, so you had some money coming in. You'll see here, and this is probably no great surprise, most immigrants who came through Ellis Island carried their bundles in a mattress or in blankets. They did not really have luggage, proper luggage that we would think of. They went through a medical inspection. This was one of the things everyone had to go through, that they were looking for issues. There was a hospital on site at Ellis, and I'd say about 20% of the immigrants were detained for medical or legal reasons. Therefore, there were dormitories on Ellis. There was a school for children and obviously dining opportunities. Let me just move on here. And because people lived on Ellis, if you were detained, they celebrated holidays, and life went on at Ellis Island. And also, it was something that's important to keep in mind is every ethnic group had an aid organization office that was open on Ellis Island to answer questions and help people get ready for entering America. And I understand that there were about 40 different organizations who provided those services. So people came to Ellis for any number of reasons, and many of them came here with great expectations, but that was not necessarily what they found. This is a quote, not named, but a quote from the exhibit at Ellis Island. So we've heard the streets paved with gold, but that was not necessarily the case. And one of the problems encountered by immigrants was anti-immigration sentiments, which carry through to today, unfortunately. And I'm going to share now some cartoons through the years that show what public sentiment was, or criticism towards public sentiment, and how it really has continued throughout the decades. So here is something from 1860 when there was concern about too many Chinese coming through. This led to the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882, and that was the country's first major restriction on immigration. This cartoon is from 1888. It's also saying they do not want Asians, and I believe the other gentleman represents Italians. Here is a satirical cartoon that talks about Liberty Island becoming basically a dumping ground for immigrants. So there's a fear factor, and there's too much, and wanting to depict concern of send them back. One of the ships here is labeled Refuge, and the other one is called European Garbage. So that was the sentiment there. Yet another one here from 1982. And this is all before Ellis opened and it became the peak immigration. This here is blaming Germans and Poles and Italians of bringing in all the wrong people. This next cartoon shows wealthy Americans, but it's called Looking Backward because it shows here they're wealthy men now, but this is who they were when they arrived, and they've forgotten their roots. And it's okay now for them to stop immigrants from coming because they're here and they've succeeded, but forgotten where they came from. In 1921, the Emergency Quota Act was established. And this was the first time numerical limits were placed on the number of immigrants who could come to the US. In 1924, that rule became even stronger with what became known as the National Origins Act, or the Johnson-Reed Act. And that limited immigration to only 165,000 people a year. It also set country by country limits. So certain ethnic groups would be kept out. And that particularly applied to Eastern and Southern Europeans. And there was not major change to legislation until the 1960s, which I found very surprising. This was during World War II, some propaganda. And yet another cartoon just from about 5-6 years ago that talks about sentiment. So everything old is new again, I guess. So I'm just sharing a little bit about that. You can actually hear many immigrants' own personal stories. There is the Oral History Project, which was created in the 1970s and built upon over the years. And there's about 2,000 interviews. It includes passengers, families of immigrants, immigrant officials, people who had been detained at Ellis, employees, and in their own words, they share what their experience was like coming to here, coming to the US, assimilating or not, what the experience was like on the ferry and things like that. Here's one sort of entertaining, and here's where the other issue with my technology is going to happen here. Let's see if I can make this
She said, oh yes, she said us. And now her Joe brought in a pizza pie. This is pizza. Oh.
Miss Suzanne, I don't know, the audio isn't coming in very clearly.
Okay. That's what I was hoping you all could see the captions there. But Kathleen's transcript and audio interview are available via our website, statueofliberty.org. You can find the oral histories there. And there are some amazing stories. I really recommend checking those out. We, as an organization, we encourage people to capture their own oral histories, their own family stories before they're gone. And some things that you learn may be family lore. It didn't really happen that way, but there are many bits of history that will be important to capture, because once the storytellers are gone, they're gone. So speaking of storytelling, I also encourage you to visit our website. On the education page, we have a section called Stories from Ellis, and here you will learn about more about the immigrant experience, as well as tips on how to do your own research. So these are just a couple of examples. You'll see on the left, names not changed at Ellis. That is a common myth. People think that, people will often say, oh, my name was so-and-so, and they changed it at Ellis. In fact, they didn't. When you came to Ellis, the inspectors were looking at the manifest that had been filled out at your port of departure. Nothing was written on the manifest. It was just checked off. Things were checked off on the manifest when you arrived. So what's your name? Where did you come from? So that was it. So names were not changed. People, not surprisingly, altered their name over time. I was Andrew Tisch, who is, as in the Tisch School at NYU and Lowe's Corporation. He's on our board, and his family's story is pretty interesting. Long, complicated name I can't say, but his great-grandfather, I think it was, played basketball at City College, and saying his name was, you couldn't really cheer him. So they shortened it to Tisch, and that's where the family got its name, as he sort of personally adjusted to it when he was in college. So there are stories like that of how families assimilated in their own little special way. These videos that you can hear on our education page as well talks about what happened when a passenger died at sea, when a baby was born. Yes, there were stowaways and what happened to them when they came through. So these are just 2-3 minute videos that are little interesting bits of information, some fun trivia. The American Family Immigration History Center was established by the foundation it's 20 years next month, actually. It was 2001. And I mentioned earlier, one of the key questions when people came to the museum to start with in the 1990s was, well, where's my story? And that's what led to the pre and post Ellis years, the museum expansion. But people wanted to see their documents as well. So prior to April 17, 2001, you would have to go to the National Archives, scroll through microfilm to look up your family records and such. We were the first to make this available online, and it was so incredibly successful that we broke the internet, if you will. People had to get up in the middle of the night to actually access it. It's safe to say that this database becoming available online really changed genealogy, and it made it available to the masses and led to what is now one of the world's most popular pastimes. The database has records for 65 million travelers. It focuses specifically on the Port of New York. It includes what we refer to as the Castle Garden records. So if your family did not arrive to New York while Ellis was open, the pre-Ellis records are called the Castle Garden records, and they're in there as well. And then even as people started coming via airplane, we have those manifests in our database as well. So it really is a great resource. As many as 40% of Americans might be able to trace some roots back to Ellis Island. So it's fun to explore. And they're all, of course, also looking at famous passengers and just seeing what the database shows. It's a great way to explore. So as I mentioned earlier, that children were marked down, everyone was marked down. So regardless of what your story is, if you have a connection to Ellis, we can probably find it. Of course, there are a couple of issues at hand. I showed you that manifest earlier of the Iacocca family, and just handwriting was different. Things maybe not were clear. The database was digitized by the foundation, but transcribed by volunteers who painstakingly went through all of those records and pulled the information. So some letters may be wrong, some dates or ages may be wrong. So when you're doing your search, you have to be a little open to trying different spellings, extending the years that you're looking at. We do offer on our website some great tips for searching. There's no audio to this. I just want to show you some of the visuals you'll see. You'll be able to, this is tips on how to do the search yourself. The database is completely free if you go onto our website. If you choose to do the research at Ellis Island, at the center itself, there's a nominal fee to use the computers there. And if you are not inclined to do your own research, our team of research experts can do the research, help you with your research, help you along the way. That's something we call the dedicated passenger search. And for a donation of $50, our team can get you started on your journey. The last thing I want to talk about is the Wall of Honor. If you've been out to Ellis, the Wall of Honor is between the building and the Hudson overlooking Lower Manhattan. We created this as a fundraising tool in the 1990s, but it has grown to be such a treasured piece for many. There are 770,000 names on it, I believe. And it's not just Ellis immigrants, it's anyone who wants to celebrate their family coming to America, regardless of what port they came through. My family came through mostly Boston or Philadelphia. It's okay to put our name on there. If you came through just last year and you want to just celebrate that coming to America, you can add a name to the Wall of Honor, and you can learn more about that on our website as well. And this has been just in general a great way to support the foundation as well. As I think I may have mentioned, we don't take government funding. Everything has been, all this $800+ million we've raised in 40 years has been from private donors. So anyone who purchases a manifest from us or puts their name on the Wall of Honor or just donates as a member supports our mission and helps us continue to execute these great projects. So that is the gist of what I wanted to share with you all. I am happy to attempt to answer questions. If I don't know the answer, I'm going to stop sharing. I am happy to get back to you with answers if I don't have them off the top of my head. So,
You want to go to the chat and see what's there?
yeah, let's do that. Great. Okay, let me see if I can move this over here. Let us see. Okay. Oh, okay, the shackles. Oh, okay, good. I'm glad you saw that. I'm just reading through, sorry. A lady considered a Mary Poppins of sorts. I don't know about that.
You need to read the question.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forget in what exhibit I saw this, but who was the lady considered a Mary Poppins of sorts? I don't know that. Okay. Yes, the island was named for Mr. Ellis, and Liberty Island was formerly called Oyster Island, and then Bedloe's Island. It was actually Bedloe's Island when the statue was erected on there, and not renamed Liberty Island until the 1900s.
Someone's asking whether Latinos ever went to Ellis Island.
Absolutely, and I tried to get some statistics about Central and Latin America before from the National Park Service before this, but the gentleman I usually work with has been out. But I'm happy once I get that information to share it with Debbie and she can distribute it to the attendees. Because I can get from this guy some more statistics about immigration in general. But even the years when Ellis was open, it was mostly European. That was a great deal of it. Let's see. From Amy, my grandpa was given a misspelling of some totally random German word as his new last name. Now, as mentioned, that did not happen at Ellis Island, but maybe he departed not from a German port, and where he got his ticket from may have misspelled, or wherever he was from. Maybe he departed from a German port and they miswrote his name. That's definitely a possibility. And my colleagues at the History Center are amazing sleuths. So I really would recommend a visit out to Ellis or take advantage of the dedicated passenger search if you want some help with doing your research. Thank you to the Hats Off to the work that we're doing. We love it. It really is. It's very rewarding, and and relevant. Obviously, it remains very, very relevant. Immigration on the West Coast. I'm not very familiar with that, but I'm learning more about it. There's the Ellis Island of the West Coast, if you will, was Angel Island in San Francisco Bay. And I recommend you check out their website. That experience was obviously different. Not only the way the island itself was structured, but the rules and regulations that kept many Asians from entering the U.S. As I mentioned, the Chinese Exclusion Act, and that is history that is covered in our museum, but more specifically or in more detail on the West Coast. What was the procedure to become a citizen? I was afraid you were going to ask that. I will have to get back to you on that. That is not my expertise.
Did you answer what is the dollar value of the restoration backup?
What is the dollar value of
The restoration backlog.
Oh gosh, you mean for the restoration of the database? Is that what you were?
Mitch, come in, Mitch. Can you answer your question? Ask your question, Mitch?
No, I'm talking about the hospital and all the buildings on the New Jersey side of the island.
On the New Jersey side, I would direct you to a different organization called Save Ellis Island. They are the ones who oversee the south side where the hospital is. You can do a fascinating hard hat tour of that part of the island. So I don't know actually if they have priced out what it would cost to restore that side of the island.
It's a lot of money. I know that much. You know that too.
Given what was spent on Ellis in the 90s was 300 to 400 million, and that was how many years ago? So I can't imagine what it would be on the south side. But I would love that, because just bring the hospital and where people lived, and that there were homes where the doctors stayed, and when you take the hard hat tour, you see the morgue. And of course, it's just that creepy in a fun way. So I recommend checking that out.
I've taken the hard hat tour and I hardly endorse it. If anybody can get on it, it is just cool.
It's really cool, and you have to book it in advance. And I think it is happening now that things are back open again. You can go to the National Park Service website, as well as Statue Cruises. Statue Cruises is the only way to get to the islands. So check out statuecruises.com if you're looking for tickets to do that. But a heads up, currently, the ferries are not leaving from Liberty State Park. I believe they'll be started again in April. The issue, there was damage to the dock, so the ferries can't actually safely dock right now and let passengers on. So you can come to Battery Park if you care, or give it 4 or 5 weeks and check Statue Cruises website and the National Park Service website to see if it's reinstated, because it really is quite simple to go through Liberty State Park. Just come right down the Turnpike extension and boom, you can hop on the ferry there. Yeah, Save Ellis does some great projects, some great programs too. I'm probably a little more in depth than I am with this. Where people turn back if they had 0 US contacts and a destination, I don't believe they were turned back. That's not my understanding. They may have been detained until they got in touch with someone, or as I mentioned before, among the 2% who were denied entry, if they were thought they were destitute, but if it was clear they could work and they didn't have some sort of communicable disease, they could be let in. You didn't necessarily have to be sponsored throughout the entire period. where people were rejected for disease, were they kept here or sent back, depended on the disease they had. There was an eye disease that I can't remember the name of right now. Someone may know. And they would use the hook to pull your eye back to see if you had it. It could cause blindness. So that was something you got sent back for. But if you came with a regular illness, that's what the hospital was for, and the dorms were for, because if you were the person who was sick, you stayed in the hospital, and the people you were with would stay in the dorms until you were better, and that happened. So, what was their legal destination on arrival? My understanding again is that it wasn't, people were allowed in until those exclusion acts and the cap came through. So it wasn't like it is like the talk now. People were not considered illegal. They came here, they went through the process, and then it took, and I will absolutely find a resource for you all to share about what it took to become an American citizen at that point.
And I will pass that on to everybody in a follow-up.
Thank you. Let me just see here. Yep, that's the disease. Trachoma, is that how you say it? Yep, trachoma. Yep, thank you, Diane. Diana.
All good, all good.
Did everybody get a chance to ask their
She's
questions?
doing a little quick research, I can tell. Any other questions? I think I've covered them all.
Oh, I had one question. So is there a way for immigrants to like still record their histories at the museum, or is that kind of like an independent, on your own kind of activity?
Two-part answer to that. The Oral History Project is not the one that I played the recording, the woman about the pizza. If you couldn't hear it, I'm sorry. Really go to our website and check out the oral histories. That is officially not happening anymore because it was run by the National Park Service. Through the foundation, we invite people to submit family stories. So you can find that on our website as well, the opportunity to do that. Also, if you check out our Facebook page, and I'll share some links with Debbie as well for this, a colleague of mine hosts twice monthly webinars about oral histories and with tips from genealogists about different ways to capture oral histories. Maybe you're speaking to a child or any number of recommendations they give. So I'll share that with Debbie as well, because those are wonderful tips for yourself. But we welcome stories to be shared with us along with images that we then feature on the website. They're great stories to share. And no one, I've heard this as well. People think, oh, my story isn't interesting until they start talking about it. And then they realize, okay, yeah, that was interesting. Or they learn a little something about themselves they didn't know. I know many people who go through, do a DNA search and find things they didn't know, family members they may not have known. I'm among them. My colleague Jackie was featured on CBS This Morning the other day, and then on more so on their online site. And she had done the history for the reporter Tony DeCopel, and found that his grandfather, the name DeCopel wasn't really the family name by blood because a woman had gotten remarried but used the original name. So those are the types of things that you find out, and but I always heard my grandmother came to Ireland when she was 21 and married. Nope, she was 17. And so you learn these things because family lore is exactly that, lore. And it's stories that we learn over the years. Maybe someone was hiding something, or maybe someone misremembered, or they don't really know what year they were born. Other ways when you're doing your family history, so the Ellis Island database is a great way to bridge the old world to the new. So you find out where your family came from, when they came from. And from there, you can start to piece together where they ended up. And going backwards, there are other organizations that Find My Past. They're focused on the UK, Ireland as well. And from there, you can see where your family came from. What was happening historically when your family came here? What was happening historically in the US, that why they came here? You know, going back to that streets paved with gold. People came here expecting work, and was there work? Was there not work? How did they all adjust? So history is such an important part of the immigrant experience throughout time, obviously.
So I'm just going to do a quick commercial for the library. There's 3 things, ways of finding out what's going on. I hope you can hear me okay. The first is to like us on Facebook. The second is to write me an email, and I wrote to all of you, and just write your full name and write yes, and I'll add you to our newsletter list. And the third one is to go to our website. We have next week, we have programs on financial literacy and about fraud. And we also have a program on the American Songbook, which was a huge success before. Everybody from Sinatra to the Beatles on up. I hope you'll come to that as well. I do want to thank Suzanne for participating today, and I want to thank all of you for joining us today. And this doesn't mean the end, but I think I'm going to stop recording with this and tell you thank you again, especially to Suzanne.
Thank you, everyone.